Welcome to the WanderLearn-Podcast. I'm your host, Franz Tapon. In this episode, I have the legendary Chris Christensen, who is the host of the Amateur Traveler Podcast. He's been doing this for over 17 years. And I asked him what are his 3 most memorable Amateur Traveler Podcast episodes. He also answers a question about what his 3 favorite places are in the world that he's traveled to, and he's been to many, many countries. I asked him about the future of travel and how his podcast is going and how it evolved, and what surprised him in the last 17 years of podcast. And finally, we talk about his future travel plans. Be sure to go to speakpipe.com/ftapon to leave an anonymous voicemail message to tell me what you think about this episode or questions you have for future episodes. Also, go to patreon.com/ftapon to get some sweet rewards for being part of my WanderLearn community. Enjoy this interview with Chris Christensen. What have been your 3 favorite episodes you made so far on it? How many have you made? 1,000 yet? Or
No, 805-ish.
Oh, you're such a wimp. Come on.
Yeah.
What? You're slacker. You're slacker.
It's only 17 years.
Out of that, what are your 3 that come to mind that are some of the most memorable?
Most memorable. One of the shows that was most memorable was a show I did relatively early on with a couple that was biking around the world, biking around Asia mostly. And they were going through Iran. And the thing that stands out from that episode was the hospitality.
I remember listening to that episode. Yeah. Do you remember if somebody wants to find it, like what would they search for?
What number? Yeah, just search for Iran. If you with any country we talk about an amateur traveler, if you go to amateurtraveler.com/tag and then /Iran, okay, you'll find episodes about the country, and that's true with all countries.
Number 2.
This is actually going to answer one of your other questions, too. We did an episode, again, a long time ago with Zora O'Neill, who's a travel writer, about the Yucatan Peninsula. And it was such a cool episode that my family and I then went, and we drove the Rutapuk and went down in a cave with 10,000-year-old cave art. And, we're in Merida and on Sunday when they were dancing in the square and eating our $1 tacos. And, it was a great episode that inspired me to travel.
So you actually listen to your guests sometimes?
I do. Absolutely.
You actually take their advice? Sometimes. Not the ones that go to Chad.
Not the ones that go to Chad as it happens. As it happens, yes.
And number 3?
Probably most memorable, best pitch I ever got. And this, again, is an old episode. I had a pitch from a lawyer in Atlanta who said, I don't know if you'd be interested, but I went to Tonga and I swam with whales and I took a hydrophone and recorded whale song. Is that of interest to you at all?
And it worked.
So that episode, 4th bonus one is there's one episode in Botswana that was interrupted by a lion.
Oh, I don't remember. I think I heard that one. Yeah, I think I did hear that one because that was relatively recent.
That was relatively recent. That was about 3 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Pre-pandemic.
Right. Okay. So and the Tonga, what is it? Tonga.
Okay. Where you can swim with whales.
Okay. You haven't been tempted yet.
I have not made it. There are a lot of places we talked about that I personally have not made it yet.
How many countries have you been to so far?
It depends a little bit how you count. Probably
100?
No, more like 70-ish.
Okay. And so that brings me up to my next question, which is 3 destinations that you've been to of the 70-ish countries that you've been to that are top of the list. Like these countries were awesome.
Mexico I'll throw in first because, the experience in the Yucatan, also San Miguel de Allende and all, other places that I've been down there as well, Oaxaca and such. So Mexico is definitely a place I want to go again.
Number 2?
Quite different would be Botswana.
Okay. And 3?
I love. There's sort of 2 in my head here. I love Istanbul as a city. Okay. I love the city of Istanbul. It is, as somebody who loves history, it's just heaped on top of one another with some great food on the side. Okay,
and then 3 places you want to go to.
Some places that I haven't been that people might be surprised. I haven't been to Scotland and would like to get to Scotland.
Neither have I.
Namibia.
That's my favorite African country.
I'm not surprised. I've heard that from a number of people.
Yeah. And number 3?
And number 3, either more of India or Sri Lanka.
Okay. I've never been to India or Sri Lanka, so Why do you like India? Assume you did the Golden Triangle, whatever that thing is called.
So I did New Delhi and Agra and Jaipur, but I also went over to Varanasi. And
where is that?
So Varanasi's over farther to the east on the Ganges, and it's a holy city with lots of holy cows and don't step in the holy crap. And
holy shit!
But you're really in India at that point. You're walking through the ghats where people are being cremated. You're having your lhasa while somebody is being carried through this. Somebody's body is being carried through the streets. I mean, it's a fascinating place.
Future of travel. What are we looking at?
More travel than the last 2 years.
That's a real safe bet, Chris.
So I find that
it doesn't get much lower.
Yeah. So I've been doing this like 17 years, and I find the safest bet is to bet the travel doesn't change that much. There are some reasons why we travel the way we do, and I get all these predictions and then we're going to do this, and everybody's going to be into sustainable travel, which they should be. But I don't think so. Everybody's going to stop doing this and start doing this, and
virtual travel will take over. You put on your 3D goggles.
We're going to travel the way we used to as much as we can.
Okay. So just more travel. There's any major change that you can see other than the fact that it will finally start picking up in 2023.
Well, it's already pre-pandemic levels on flights. It's picking up in 2022.
Wait, I heard all these flights got canceled.
Oh, it's a mess. It is a mess.
But that wasn't pre-pandemic. It wasn't that much.
So the problem is the flight volume is greater than pre-pandemic, but the staffing is bad, and people are getting sick, and the capacity is it's a mess right now. It's a mess.
So that will take until 2023 probably to work itself out.
I'm hoping the end of the summer-ish, but we've got some pilot shortages that are going to affect some airlines and things like that. So we'll see. Maybe 2023.
All right.
Flying right now is you need some patience.
So you started your podcast, the Amateur Traveler Podcast, amateurtraveler.com, before the iPod was invented.
No, that's not true.
But it sounds good. Come on, work with me. Come on, let's.
Before
I'm trying to promote.
The iPhone was invented. No, because we were already doing podcasts, and podcasts were named after iPods. So
don't let the facts ruin my story, Chris.
No, I started in July of 2005. Podcasts. They didn't start like all at once, then one magic day, but sort of September-ish of 2004 is kind of when podcasting got started.
So why does Joe Rogan have more followers than you, since you guys started around the same time?
He's probably more interesting. And not everybody wants to travel. I mean, it might be a surprise to us as people who like to travel that not everyone does.
Oh, yeah. I know, my mom. Yeah.
We have friends who, every Christmas card is the picture of the kids standing in front of the
same fireplace.
The old sailor out at their beach house that they've gone to every year. Okay. And they're looking for relaxation and comfort. Right. And I'm looking for adventure and new. Right. And that's different. Not even if the people who like to travel don't all travel the same way.
I know lots of people. They go to Paris like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And then they're like, well, I'm like, what about the rest of Europe? Oh, but I love Paris. Okay.
Yeah.
They'll even go to the same restaurant in Paris.
Yeah. Well, we do some of that too. When we go down to Monterey and Carmel, I've got a favorite place. So
no, I understand that. And what do you think is the future of podcasting?
So podcasting...
sorry, let me interrupt you.
Is a fad. No, sorry.
It's going to be over by 2025.
I think we'll be done. I think it'll be done by the end of this episode. We don't kill it, nothing will. No, go ahead. You were going to finish the thought.
I was going to ask you about, since you started...
Yeah.
What surprised you? You probably imagined certain things back in 2008, or what was it, 1908? What was it when you started?
2005.
Okay. Whenever you started, prior to the pod.
The iPod was around, but the iPod was still steam driven at the time. So a lot of people don't remember that version.
That's right.
Had to hand crank it.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so back then, what surprised you?
You could only put Victrola music on it. That's the first version, but
So what surprised you over the years? Like you didn't predict, what you didn't see coming, for example?
So I loved podcasting from the start, right? I got into podcasting because I liked podcasts. I still listen to, I think I probably have 70 subscriptions.
Yeah, about me too, probably.
Unfortunately, not everyone comes out every week, and not everyone comes out every day. But
thankfully,
but I have,
except for Gary Arndt.
I used to do, damn you, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
I used to do 90 subscriptions, so I've got back. I've gone a little more crazy, less crazy, but so I wasn't surprised that it got more popular. Because when I got started, no one knew what a podcast was. And I was going to say, even your mom didn't know that you were doing a podcast. My mom still doesn't know that I'm doing a podcast, but she's 94, so we'll cut her some slack. But so I wasn't surprised that it took off, but it just kept going up and to the right, and that was, I don't know if I'd go as far as surprising, certainly pleasing. Mostly flat and up and to the right, except for the one knee in the curve was iPhone adding podcasting. Right. That's the one point. Everybody thinks it's like, the one inflection point was that. Other people think that it was like Serial or some particular podcast, and that's not true. Mm-hmm. The numbers don't bear that out, but it really was the iPod. iPhone, right? Sorry, if Google were ever to add a native app, we'd probably also see another inflection point.
They have. It's called Google Podcasts.
No, it's not a native app. It's not built in.
It's not built into the Android?
No, it's not quite as simple and easy as.
Really, it's not built into Android. I guess because I always get the Pixel phones.
We still get a lot more podcast listeners on a disproportionate amount on iPhones versus Android compared to the installed base.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because like 70% installed base is Android.
Yeah, so 30%. It should be 70% of podcasts.
Right.
But it's not. Still the number one by far is
maybe because iPhone users are smarter than me, like Android.
I won't go with that. No. I think it's just not as easy. So, okay. And we saw that. We saw that curve.
So maybe that one of your
iPhone.
Predictions, looking into the future of podcasts.
I think they'll eventually get around to it. To make it as easy.
And those Android people eventually.
Yeah. And we're seeing more and more people. Well, so the streaming services all added it because it made good financial sense for them, because they don't pay podcasters royalties. And so if you spend an hour listening to a podcast, they make money off advertising and they don't have to pay anybody anything. If you spend an hour listening to music, they have to pay all the artists and they make money on the ads. And so it made sense that Pandora and Stitcher and all those things added podcasting. And so we'll see that on all the streaming services. I think eventually we'll see podcasting be out there because it just makes sense for them economically. So there will be a saturation point. I mean, we did see some flattening of the curve in the pandemic as people's whole lives were disrupted and they weren't doing their usual things and they were trying to homeschool their kids and do their job and, figure out all those things. But it still seemed to be growing. I was surprised as a travel blogger. Most of us who were travel bloggers lost somewhere between I'd say 50% of your traffic overnight was pretty typical, 60%. I've seen some travel bloggers at the show, Dave and Deb said they lost 90% of their traffic overnight.
95, I think.
And the podcast audience didn't go away, except for that one guy who said, we're never going to travel again. It's all the Chinese fault for inventing the virus.
Was that Gary Arndt?
No, he wasn't. A 1-star review and gone.
Oh, okay.
But except for that one guy, other people kept saying, I'm so glad you're still doing a show about travel. Okay. I still want to think about travel. I still want to dream about travel. I'm not traveling. So there still is that pent-up desire to travel. The overall numbers for my show went down because people weren't planning their trip, so they weren't downloading it again later on to say, "Oh, so Chad, how do I get this now that I'm?" Right. And we talk about Chad. I don't know if people understand that you did the episode on Chad, which is why we're ragging on the Chad episode.
Exactly. Right. Very good. And so to wrap up, your travel plans for 2023 or the end of 2022?
I haven't a clue. The amateur traveler trip to Turkey, we just had to cancel. We were 2 people short of the minimum number because
you lead a trip there.
Yeah, we before the pandemic we were doing a trip every year.
I didn't know.
Yeah, and the last 3 years we tried to do a trip to Turkey and it has failed because of COVID. And this time, some people were still nervous about COVID. There's also a war on the other side of the Black Sea from Turkey.
Really?
That made people a little nervous.
What war?
And then, like, my wife, she actually backed out of going on the trip because our grandson is being born right when the trip is happening.
If you can't even bring your wife along.
Yeah, and 4 other people had, one of their daughters basically scheduled a wedding. So, it just didn't work again. So
maybe it's just not meant to be.
So yeah,
maybe you need to watch the Netflix episode about Turkey getting sacked.
That might be it. That might be it. So I've got some trips back to to a baby shower and to a birth for my daughter, but I really have nothing else planned this year. So I don't know.
Nothing for 2023.
And nothing for 2023. That's not that surprising.
So you're going to change your name from Amateur Traveler to No Traveler.
No Traveler. Well, no, I'm not saying that something won't come up.
Of course.
That's the weird thing with being a travel podcaster or travel blogger is, I've had the, hey, can you come to the Yukon next week?
Right.
Literally next week.
Right.
Because, somebody didn't do the job they were supposed to do, and somebody didn't fill that slot on their press trip, or, you're getting sloppy seconds, but who the hell cares?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for it. If anybody else is listening. Great. Chris, pleasure as always. I tell everybody how to subscribe to the Amateur Traveler and by the way, you're not just a podcaster. You do have a blog. And I do have a blog. And you even have an Instagram.
I even have an Instagram, yeah.
And there's a lot of bikini shots.
There's someplace, but
there's bikini shots.
No one wants to see that.
Okay, so tell them how to find you.
So any place you find podcasts, just search for Amateur Traveler. It's not hard to find.
And that ends this episode of the WanderLearn podcast, where we explore travel, technology, and transformation. If you'd like to see the show notes with links to what we've talked about, go to WanderLearn.com and click on this episode. If you'd like to connect with me, just remember Tapon. That's my first initial and my last name. Tapon is always my social media username. My website is ftapon.com. Do you want to leave me an anonymous voicemail where you can make a comment or ask a question? Then go to speakpipe.com/ftapon. Furthermore, if you'd like to get rewarded for supporting my projects, then go to patreon.com/ftapon. That's where you can pick up some remarkable rewards for as little as $2 a month. Now, 5 quick favors. Number 1, subscribe to the WanderLearn podcast. 2, download it. 3, share it. 4, review it. And 5, sign up for my newsletter at WanderLearn.com. Our theme music was composed by Eric Stratman. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn.